Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. This is our concepts edition for the week where we go over overarching themes, theory, general explorations, and crazy thinking. I'm Devin Bedoni.
And I'm Uriel Eisen.
Got a quote for us.
Got a quote. You can't change the people around you, but you can change the people around you. Unknown source. Kind of pithy.
I like it.
Yeah. I don't know exactly how it applies to lean, but I kind of pulled it out.
Yeah. I mean, my first thought was just that, like, you can't, the two different words of change, right?
Mm-hmm.
You cannot change the people around you, but you can exchange the people around you for other people to develop a good team and, make a group of people that are a good fit for what you're trying to do. I think that's pretty key. Everyone would agree.
Probably. Yeah. I don't know.
On the flip
I think
side,
this podcast is all sort of based on the premise of like changing the way we operate and the way we think. So like, I feel like there's a lot of sort of content out there that's sort of like, if your friends do this, get new friends. And it's like, I mean, you can't make new old friends. So I don't know. There's value to, but
the flip side of it is that, like, you can't change people around you, but you can encourage them to change themselves. And you can create an environment that encourages that, and what's the word, like, cultivates that, right. The change that you want to see, which I think maybe is actually maybe a more interesting interpretation of this, being that
that's
like in a very lean way, right? Like the lean management strategy is in counterpoint to the traditional top-down, like, coercive management,
right, command
strategy.
And control.
Yeah, so it's like, if you accept that you can't change the people around you, then you're forced to go about it a different way.
Interesting. Yeah, and given the emphasis of the Toyota production system on developing people, I think maybe that's a nice, relevant interpretation of just like, it's really important to support the people around you and educate the people on your team. But to your point, you can't make them change.
No.
And from what I understand, like, there's a book called Traction, and one of the things it's a method of operating a company that's pretty interesting. But they say, like, once you've really transformed your company to operate that way, I think they said, like, they typically see like 30% of the people are going to show themselves to the door, basically.
Oh, interesting.
And so, like, I think there's both. There's support people to change. There's help them, educate them. But at some point, there might be a small percentage of people who are just really not a good fit if you're moving through a substantial transformation.
Yeah. And then maybe a third view would be that, like, you don't change people. It doesn't necessarily, it's not binary, like stay or go. Yeah. But also recognizing people's strengths and weaknesses and putting them in the right positions. Being like, well, I can't change you to be this other thing that you're not, but you do this thing really well. So let's, like, stick you here and let you really, like, flourish with this skill that you're good at.
It's very funny. I was listening to another podcast and they were talking about, I'm forgetting the name of the podcast, but they were talking about, it was a lean consultant, and they were talking about some lean transformations they'd worked on, and it was eye-opening or something, a reminder of, like, the difference in scale of where lean is typically applied compared to both of our organizations. Because he was like, this is how you support this type of person and this type of person, and you can have everyone kind of working on things that apply to them. I was like, well, that sounds nice. Yeah.
What if there's only two of us?
Exactly. Yeah. And it does still apply. Like, I've tried to become, I'm trying to get better at working on the things that I need to work on. Yeah. Instead of working with the team on things that maybe they need help working on. But, like, at the end of the day, I think I just need to let people kind of struggle a little bit more. Yeah. Just like, I've done a lot of this, they haven't, but a great way to get better is to mess it up. And maybe I'm not giving them the chance as much as I should, especially with things that really don't matter.
Right. It's hard to find that middle ground, especially with mission critical things. Where you're like, you really need to learn this because I need you to do this every day.
But also, I will do this one.
But also, don't mess it up.
Yeah. I would say for me, like sometimes it's about speed, where it's like we have 30 minutes and I just want to get this thing done, and I am like much faster. You know, so
yeah,
whatever.
Yeah. Interesting.
I was thinking maybe you want to jump into kind of I'm very curious to hear about the move to the big shop.
Yes.
Struggles, wins, struggles.
Mostly, yes. It has happened. We have moved our shop.
That's awesome.
It is awesome. I've been saying to people that it's like I'm having to work hard to get my like 20-year-old dirtbag brain like up to speed with what we're doing now. You know,
in terms of like spending money.
Just I don't know. This just feels like the most adult thing that I've done. Sort of.
Okay. Yeah.
And there was, I think, when I was in this little garage shop, even though I'd invested a lot of money in machines and like very little has actually changed, there was still this thing that's kind of like, we're scrappy. I could kind of like, whatever. If I wanted to do something else in a year, I'll just like sell the machines and be done with it. And now it's kind of like, it feels much more professional and like there's a lot of weight. Where was I going with that? Anyway, so that's been a thing that's been just kind of like an emotional sidebar of like wrapping my head around what we're doing now and kind of
I could definitely see that. Like for me, I've sort of put off moving for that reason. Not like sell the machines and go do something else, but just like waiting for the business to support that kind of thing without it being just humongously stressful and having to like hit sales really hard, which I feel like would sort of crowd out like product development and some other stuff. Yeah. So anyway, I could imagine that being
it feels
like a big step up in like, all right.
Yeah. Anyhow, so mostly it's been, I think like all things considered, it went pretty smooth and was not super expensive.
Very cool.
I think we did a good job in that regard. So in some ways, like our hand was forced. I mentioned my electrician ending up in the hospital, so we did our own electrical work. That saved a bunch of money.
Oh, wow.
You know, all this stuff. But kind of the overarching theme that I've taken away from it, and which I wrote here in our notes, is that like it's really driven home the operations versus process dichotomy that we're always talking about. And kind of the key point was like, you know, I had in my head like, okay, we'll keep running machines until this date, we'll shut down, we'll move machines, we'll have machines back up and running, you know, 3 days later or whatever, we'll be back, hit the ground running, right? And we did hit our date of having machines fully operational.
Okay.
And then it was like 4 more business days.
Interesting.
Before we were really effectively able to make parts because of all of the auxiliary processes.
Gotcha.
All the linking processes.
Or operations or processes?
Sorry, operations. Yeah.
Okay.
So like all the extra stuff. It's like the 80% that we don't think about.
Right.
Which you can't. Even though like technically our machines were ready to roll, like they were good at their operation, they could still do it as quickly as possible. You know, our key things were in place, and yet we couldn't make parts effectively.
Right. I'm reminded of like when I first started, I had a big shipment that needed to go out, and I called you and I was like, do you by any chance have 3-inch by 4-inch plastic bags? Because I had run out. Yeah. Like most of the way through the order. But I couldn't ship it because I was missing like $5 of plastic.
Exactly. Yeah, stuff like that where you're like, okay, let's load this machine up and make parts. We're like, where's the tools? Oh, they're all just there's all on a rack over there. We have to go sort through all the tools still.
Interesting.
Or even when that stuff was dealt with, it's like even just the fact that everything's in a new spot, like you end up walking to the wrong place. like regularly. Like we put 2 of the machines flipped from how they were before, left to right.
Okay.
Like without thinking about it.
Oh, so now.
And everybody walked in or my crew walked in and they were like, oh no, this is going to take a while.
Interesting. And so from like a lean, I don't know, higher level view of the situation.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like you had sort of mentioned, we had talked about last week, like major interruptions versus sort of small tweaks.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it's just going to be a little while to hit a baseline before you can really improve do you know what I mean? Like see a problem, fix a problem? Like,
I don't know. Yeah. It's kind of a mix. Like there was a lot of problems that we were aware of that we're sort of fixing in resetting up.
Okay. In terms of like flow or
just like in terms of, I'm trying to think of some examples, like, you know, like some silly stuff where like our job tags would like end up on the side of a machine because we didn't have enough room on the whiteboard. So like adding more whiteboard. Physical space.
Gotcha.
Like,
yeah.
A lot of these physical space issues, relocating things that didn't work well before. So a lot of that is happening in process. We're not like just trying to cookie cutter back to how we were.
Yeah.
Which in some ways might have been better.
To just like transplant the objects.
Yeah, like full transplant and then go from there. But it's really hard not to want to take advantage of the disruption and start off on a new foot.
Yeah. Yeah, I struggle with that. I don't know what makes sense there.
Yeah, I think we're kind of trying to ride a middle ground, like things that we knew we wanted to change and had talked about prior, we're doing that. And then everything else we're kind of just trying to start where we were, start making money again critically.
Yeah.
and then go from there.
Gotcha. So something that like just another contradiction that I've sort of been contemplating that you kind of touched on is like, well, I think this is part of it. If you do a project that's super disruptive or like major, there's a temptation to sort of stretch it out over a long time and do little bits, make sure it's all ready, all planned.
Yeah.
And I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
The flip side is I find sometimes it just like it's so slow and not actually as fruitful as just being like, okay, we're stopping everything and we're just going to finish it and get it across the finish line. And what I was thinking about is just like one of them, you have a lot of whip.
Yeah.
Right. Like you have this plan, you have spent a lot of time refining it and designing things and all that. And so it's a lot of invested man hours. I was thinking about this in regards to like new products.
Yeah.
Cause like, I feel like R&D, you need like 5 to 8 hour chunks.
Yeah. And
having like, okay, it's the end of the day and I have an hour, you don't make any progress in an hour. And so it's very hard to sort of like, I think about like production leveling versus just like, all right, stop everything. Let's make this change happen. We also installed stairs, which was similarly like reorganized the whole shop.
Yeah.
And from previous things, we just shut down the shop for a day and a half until it was done and then got back up and going because previously we had sort of like done some and then also try to run the mill and back and forth.
Yeah.
Very curious if anyone listening has thoughts on how to kind of square that circle. Because I like transplanting the whole shop, it's still going to be disruptive.
Yeah.
Yes, you're going to run more efficiently off the get-go, but now you're going to do, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say.
It's hard. I mean, I think it's another labor thing. It's like if you have a crew, if you have folks that can kind of like be planning and doing that preparatory work for a big changeover, that I think is very, very beneficial. When it's just you and you're kind of halfway thinking about it. Yeah. I don't know. It's challenging.
I've been really enjoying that. That's a very interesting point. I think about like scale. Back to the scale thing is like, you're right. You could have full-time people. Like if we were just a different scale, we would have full-time people planning a thing. Yeah. Yeah. In which case it doesn't have that same switching problem.
Like what comes to mind is like the Toyota, like factory assembly line changeovers that happen overnight. Right. Like they do that for a reason. Yeah. But they have a whole, I'm sure a giant team that's planning exactly how it's all going to happen. Right. That's not really within our capability.
Yeah, I was listening to the podcast Acquired, which I really been enjoying, about LVMH, which makes luxury goods.
Okay.
Like Louis Vuitton. No, maybe. Yeah, Louis Vuitton is the LV.
Yeah.
MH is something I don't remember.
Right.
Anyway.
It's a French corporation?
Yeah. I think he's the richest man in the world currently. Been in the news because of Succession, whatever.
Yeah.
But what was interesting, his big breakthrough, which is what sort of allowed them to be where they are, according to this podcast, was finding synergies, like basically getting like efficiencies of scale without creating issues with like a creative industry, a creative luxury good, right? Like you can't get economies of scale with Louis Vuitton by just making a ton of their goods, because then it's manufactured scarcity, so you can't flood the market.
Yeah.
But if you get a bunch of groups operating together, like they can buy advertising as a group. And so they got a lot of these big efficiencies dealing with the parts of the business that have nothing to do, well, they're critical, but have nothing to do with the, like they don't disrupt. So anyway, I just feel like I wonder, it'll be interesting, hopefully, as we grow, to sort of see, like, I feel like I don't know if bastardizing is exactly what we're doing, right? But like, I guess what it is like you do need to, I mean, this is another example of like, you need to take the Toyota production system and apply it to what you're doing, and not just be like, all right, we are going to do all the things they do, because like, it just doesn't quite fit. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess the big take home, one of the other big take homes, which was kind of cool, was it really, like, what's the like good version of a frog in boiling water?
I don't know.
Anyway, I feel like we've had the good version of a frog, like getting used to its circumstance over the last like year and a half.
Okay.
Of like these systems improving.
Yeah.
And just kind of like taking it for granted, and like moving into this new shop and having it all effectively kind of fall apart was very eye-opening to like how far we've come, and that we do have like a pretty good system going, which was cool to be like, okay, we used to kind of suck at this. Like we were good at a couple parts, and now we're good at a decent chunk of this whole process.
And sorry, that was apparent because the bits of the process weren't in place.
Yeah, because
before you were sort of like making it up as you go anyway, and so
like a year and a half or 2 years ago, when it was transitioning from being just me and it was like all in my head, and you know, whoever was working for me would be like, where's that thing? Like, you know, in the box in the drawer that's above the thing. And now like so many things do just work when the pieces are in place, that I've begun to take it for granted. And then all of a sudden all the pieces were out of place, and we had to reset all of these systems that we had put in place. You know, it's interesting just setting up the machines and being like, okay, we got air, we got power, we're ready to run. And then being like, oh, we rely on standardized work coordinate systems now. We have to go back and reset all of those. Like,
interesting.
Let's go through every machine and reset all those and make sure it's all good.
Very cool.
Trying to think of some other examples, but a lot of stuff like that, where our day-to-day has started to rely heavily on these foundational systems that had to be reestablished after moving to a new location.
Interesting. Yeah, I would guess that you're going to, like, even if you don't have everything explicitly spelled out in terms of like SOPs at every step, I would guess that getting back up and running, you will be reinventing a lot less than if you had moved without those systems.
Yeah, certainly.
Because then it would be like a chance to reinvent how the process works instead of like just maybe where certain operations happen.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it is a good example, or a good opportunity as well, to reassess things, I think. You know, we had all of our tools disorganized, in the process of reorganizing them, being like, is this the ideal way? Should we, what parts of this do we need to reassess? Lots of stuff like that. It's been good. It's been stressful though.
I could imagine. The
bank account agrees.
Brutal. So let's see. One thing, so I've been thinking a lot about product development. Hopefully we're close-ish to releasing a new product.
Yep.
We'll see exactly when that happens. Could be like, 5 years or so. No, no, it's pretty close.
More like 7.
But so from our last episode, last week, I had sort of talked about feeling a little bit confused or unclear about where continuous improvement should come in to the business right now.
Yeah.
Because it just felt like I was taking time away from critical things to improve non-bottleneck activities.
Yeah.
In a very apparent way.
Yeah.
Where I was just like, wow, that like we are not production limited, but every day we come in and work on refining production. And like theory of constraints suggests it's all waste if you're not improving the bottleneck. I think that's exacerbated by the fact that we have a pretty small team. And so you can't just like Toyota production system, everyone is improving their thing all the time.
Yeah.
And in our business, that's just not a reality. I would guess that actually in every business, it's not a reality.
Mm-hmm.
And if you see them doing that, like Toyota doing that now, that's after 60, 70 years of improving.
Yeah.
And so chances are the big juicy items are handled. I would guess that that's not like a good way of, like, they probably tried to avoid looking at it that way, but you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure they're continuously evaluating like core assumptions, I would think, or they're trying.
Yeah.
Anyway,
they've made some big, like
deciding to do electric like 20 years late. No.
I was thinking more about on the production side, like,
yeah.
When they went from more or less traditional assembly line styles to being like, we're going to completely rethink this into something that we can change over in a night.
Right. True.
Which is bananas.
That is pretty wild.
But
so anyway, like that has become very clear to me. So I've just been thinking more about that and about setting target conditions. Rereading the Toyota Kata, and one thing they said about, so this is sort of a specific example of a bigger trend or a bigger idea. They suggested, so Toyota takes Kanban cards and loads them into their production schedule in a prescribed way, which you kind of alluded to the other day, which was kind of weird and not what you think is happening, but that's how they do it. And I forget the author of Toyota Kata. They were saying
Mike Rother,
maybe. That sounds right. So he was talking about implementations and that basically production leveling never sticks for him.
Yeah,
that it never stuck until this big realization, which was basically about developing a standard pattern to highlight problems. And so the way they described, he said, like, the way you should do it is load the Kanbans into your production schedule in the order that your system calls for. Right? So like A, B, B, C or whatever.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And then look at it and just say, like, can we run production today this way? And if the answer is yes, do it. And if the answer is no, note why not. And what is causing that, and then you can and then rearrange them, and then go fix that problem. Yeah, which is just interesting because I feel like it gets back to this idea of like making sure that you set very clear target conditions. Like I feel like it can start to feel kind of limiting and kind of like, oh, we're meant to come up with SOPs for everything and then stick to it and make sure we only do standardized work. And it's almost like, I feel like more at this stage, you need to come up with an ideal and then compare yourself to that ideal. Yeah. And then note the differences instead of just sweeping them under the rug. Yeah. This morning I had a conversation on this theme about our Kanban. We're still doing a lot of expediting through the paint department. Yeah. And right now, Sam basically does it because he knows what we need for orders. And so in classic form, it makes total sense. It's sort of like, what do we need when? And let's just rearrange things a little bit. Yeah. And that's great. It keeps things flowing. And actually, I think trying to not do that right now and just like militantly sticking to the way they land on the board would not be the move. But what is the move is to record what's happening.
Yeah.
And that's not happening. So we need to kind of get back on that, where it's at least we're taking notes of like, oh, we can't do that because we'd run out of pins. Oh, we can't do that because of whatever. So like that. I'm trying to apply it to product development and kind of just rethinking or like having a good hard look at like how I'm doing product development. And because I feel like it's too slow and too like I have a lot of things that are half baked, and it's tempting to be like, okay, well, that's just like the creative process where you're like, you have to sort of marinate on ideas. And I do believe that to an extent, but not to this extent. Right.
Maybe like 20 minutes, maybe an hour or two sometimes.
Or, I mean, it could even be longer, but not this amount of time with this many ideas.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like sometimes it's like, go take a bike ride or, you know, I don't know. So and I think one thing I've been trying to do, which is not good, is I think firstly I need to come up with more ideas up front, but then I think I'm trying to like pick a winner too early instead of like taking them all forward, or like at least a few, like, oh, there's sort of this, you know, they sort of like break down into themes or and I think I'm just like, because there's a feeling of pressure to get something to market, it's like you see one that you're like, I think that will work. And then you pull it all the way forward until you hit an obstacle that makes you go back to that sort of big pool of ideas instead of pulling them all forward. And this is by no means anything new. Like if, I don't know, I went to design school and like this was kind of hammered home of like, do it the way of like, take a bunch of ideas and like you're slowly refining and refining and refining.
So how does this tie back to the leveling and Kanban?
It's a good question. Like I don't have a set, like I should have a target condition for product development of like, we launch a new product in a month or 3 months. And I think what that would solve partly is like, it's crazy to have this idea of like, when are we releasing it? Well, as soon as possible, instead of like, no, like, because then you're just trying to rush every step to its maximum kind of. And rather than saying like, okay, we have 8 weeks to release a new product. Week 1 looks like this. Week 2 looks like this. Right. And then you could actually start refining those steps and saying like, oh, look, week 1 is leading to this problem or something like that. I don't know. Right now it's just this like, there's no clarity. It's all chaos. Like, right. Like you can't see the chaos because it's in my head, but like there's no established rules. There's no like, okay, at this stage we're going to start thinking about how we're going to machine this, or if machining is the right, we're going to start thinking about like,
this is maybe totally harebrained, but do you think there's a way you could sort of include those, since they are a key part of your business and effectively
being
those aspects of product development, like into your Kanban cycle? So literally like at the beginning of the week, you throw one in and then it comes up and you're like, oh, well, can't paint. I need to go do this.
Interesting. Yeah.
And maybe even include Sam in that process to some degree,
right?
Possibly.
That's
so
a
it's
cool
like
idea.
It's takes it out of your own judgment call of like, when am I going to work on this? When am I going to work on that? We have found that to be very helpful with just making like soft jaws and stuff for internally.
Yes,
because you can always bump, and it always seems like you should bump. Yeah.
There's so many things that I think are miscategorized as like, oh, incidental, instead of like core functions. And I think that's sort of what you're saying. It's like, don't work it in around the cracks, like plan it in and treat it like you would treat production.
Like the logistics of how you include product development Kanbans in your standard system would make your brain explode maybe, but something to that effect.
I've been reading a bit about time boxing as a time management approach.
Never heard of it.
It's pretty nice. All right. When I describe it, you'll be like, yeah, that's how I do my day. No. Instead of having a to-do list and stopping at a to-do list, you then break out the number of hours you have in the day and you start plugging parts in. Because I feel like sometimes I sit down to write an email and I'm like, well, I have to write this email. Instead of being like, how long do I have to write this email?
Yeah.
And I feel like it's sort of like, it's like I have 15 minutes if I'm going to stick to this time box.
Yeah.
And so let me just hammer this out, even if it is like, hey, I'm going to have to get back to you on these details.
Yeah.
And I can get those to you tomorrow. So I've been trying to do that a little bit more of like, I have 2 hours. Here's the things I want to get done in those 2 hours.
Yeah, I like that.
And that is similar, minus Kanban, physical Kanban cards. Anyway, so it's something I've been thinking about. Like, I think right now that whole process, which I think you make a good point that it is a core process and should be treated like that. Mm-hmm. Right now it's just chaos. And I think I need to, like, in saying this, I need to do an A3, and the first phases of an A3, I don't really know what the question would be, really. Like, or the target condition, but the first phase of an A3 is like quantifying the current state. Yeah. And I think that would probably be very illuminating.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I feel like you can start with a very broad target condition and then refine. Like, you could just start with, like, we're going to release a product every 6 months, and then that kind of backs you into a corner.
Right.
And then work from there.
That's interesting. I'm also thinking about hiring someone to do CAD because if I could hand off, like, here are the concepts, here's sort of how I think this should be CAD'd. Yeah. And then they can get me back a model and I can just refine that way. I don't think I need to be the one doing
the nuts and bolts.
Yeah. Yeah. I've gotten good at CADing buckles in a way that is then machinable, but I feel like I can write a quick how-to.
Yeah, I hope so. That does seem like a thing that has more embedded knowledge than many of us kind of recognize.
Of how to construct CAD models?
Yeah, and like you probably, to be machinable and for your particular application is, I don't know. I'd
Yeah, but honestly, I could just give them some like, if they can rev one in a day and I'm like, all right, here are the problems I see. Yeah. Go fix it.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. Yeah.
And that would, you'd hand off that knowledge pretty quickly.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's what I've been thinking about, is just like how chaotic. Well, okay, to back off a little bit, to back out. I think it is easy. We've discussed this a little bit. I think having a target revenue goal has become, I've been doing that a lot because it's sort of like from the get-go, I felt a good amount of pressure to make sure that this business has legs. Mm-hmm. I have worked in the startup world for a long time, and you see people sink like 3 to 5 years into things that then turn out don't really have legs. Yeah. And then they go do something else. And so I was like very weird, like very wary of that. Yeah. And so I was like constantly pushing to like grow the business. But the downside, as we've discussed, is like the easiest way to do that is sales. Yeah. And the harder way, but much more impactful, I think it's going to be more of a step function instead of just like a little like bump, maybe monthly, is releasing new products. Yeah. And so, yeah, I've been trying to like calm down about revenue and like think about like real opportunities for the business and where to go. Yeah,
that makes sense. Following up on our conversation last week, I did have that conversation with my crew.
Which conversation? Sorry.
With the like sort of revenue target condition but not really as a goal, but as like a comparison point. Mm-hmm. And they were like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. We've got some ground to make up. And I think...
Oh, cool.
I think it's very useful in that way. If you have sort of some baseline numbers to work from, which are pretty easy for us to generate, like some theoreticals around spindle uptime and time in dollars per hour and stuff, and number of machines and stuff, and some multipliers for material costs and stuff like that.
I was thinking about that conversation as well. I would say, like, I think it is expedient for better and for worse.
Yeah.
Like, it seems really easy to generate those numbers. It seems easy and useful to sort of make that transparent to some degree. But it also seems like, to use Eliyahu Goldrat's, like, every metric should be in total alignment with the success of the organization. Like, it's very much not that.
Yeah.
The second you are not involved and overseeing kind of the whole system.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you stepped out and made someone like floor manager, and then you had a quarterly check-in and you found out that everyone's like pushing spindle uptime, or like, you'd fall into the classic.
No, yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Not that you're running that risk at the moment. But.
No, I think more what it was is I think as employees, it can be very easy to just kind of like to the reverse of that, for the employees to sort of be in the dark and be like, well, I'm working hard, I'm doing a good job.
Right.
I think we're crushing it. And then
it's like, well, we're not crushing it.
And then to be like, okay, you guys are doing a great job.
Yeah.
As an organization, this is where we stand. Then there's some, I think, like group buy-in to be like, how are we gonna make up that ground that's clearly there? And let's
Agreed.
do it as a, thoughtfully and as a group.
Yeah. And I think there's something to, like, a big part of that for me is sort of like, when you ignore it's easy to get wrapped up in the day to day. When you step back and say, here's the facts, then you can start asking the question of like, like, why is that? Or like, what would need to change to make that different? Because now we are working very hard every day, and we are like good operators. I don't know. Right. So like, it makes you sort of rethink maybe some established methods, or like, I don't know. We were just having a conversation loosely related in terms of rethinking things. This new product, like, do we want to make the sewing jig also the assembly jig? Because you'd eliminate a transfer, which is kind of cool. So you load all the parts in, load the webbing in as also a part. Yeah. And then do some screws and do some sewing on one fixture instead of having two and doing a transfer. And I don't know. I don't see any downsides really.
Aside from complexity, multiple things going wrong.
Aside from that. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I think it will basically be a sewing jig plus.
Yeah. No, it seems very doable. I was just bringing it up for the sake of conversation.
Totally. I have one other little thing.
Yeah.
That, interesting conversations. I don't think it's like a big juicy topic, but basically with this new product, it's two components. They are sort of similar size, but not the same size. And so the question was kind of like, do we standardize the stock size, or do we optimize for each part individually?
Yeah.
So like one of them, let's say, takes like a 2" by 2" by 1/2 inch, and the other one needs like a 2.5 by 2.5 by 1/2 inch. There'd be a temptation to just machine them both out of that one larger size.
Yes.
I don't know if it's that tempting, but like the idea of just managing one less, essentially a SKU in our shop, right? Like, we don't have to inventory. And that also means, and this is a real constraint for us, like, we are out of space in our shop in our current method of storing stock and our current method of keeping all of our setups at the machine. So like, this is real of like, all right, now we're going to have to change something, and that's going to be hours of work. So like, anyway, so that's kind of the thought.
Yeah. I do have thoughts. So I've definitely seen it from both sides in our business. For the most part, we do not standardize stock sizes. I have one customer where we do. And
across multiple parts.
Across a whole group of parts. Okay. And it has been very valuable there. But it's a very different scenario than what your production situation is. So the sort of the scenario we have with them is they tend to be low quantities, like anywhere from 2 to 25 pieces per part number. We generally get an order for several part numbers at a time. Okay. They are very odd parts that are hard to hold. So standardized work holding, we are able to standardize work holding because they have 2 common bolt hole features that we can work with. And in that scenario, it has worked very good because, and also short lead time. So
gotcha.
We often just keep some of the stock on hand.
Some of the bar stock and then cut it to whatever size.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the other option, was instead of 2.5 by 2.5 and then 2 inch by 2 inch, you could also do 2.5 by half bar and then cut for one of them down to 2.5 and one of them to 2-inch lengths. That would be another way of.
Yeah.
Right.
What I was going to say is I think given the fact that you do a fair amount of volume and that you're likely going to have to change work holding for each part number regardless.
Yep.
I don't think the benefits are there for you.
Yeah. And I think I've come to a similar conclusion. I also talked to Andrew over at Henry Holsters.
Yeah.
And he had some interesting thoughts just in terms of fully thinking through, well, probably not fully, but thinking through what this upsides and downsides are kind of. Is like the bigger stock size, it's wasted aluminum, which means spindle time, which also means like, you know, slightly
spindle
longer.
Time and material cost. Yeah.
Material cost, spindle time, scooping the extra chips out of the back of the machine.
Yep.
Forgetting what else was in there.
Yeah. I think this is a good thing to do for just because to make it more generally applicable to people not machining.
Yeah.
Breaking it down into all the pros and cons.
Yeah.
So you have a pro. So you went through most of the cons, right?
Yeah.
Basically. So cost of material cost, labor / machine cost.
Yep.
That's basically what it is.
And then the savings would be shop space.
Yep. Ease of ordering.
Oh, and the other thing actually, interestingly here, like you were talking about the unpredictable ratios of the SKUs. That's a major contributor. But because these always ship as a set of one of each, then that's not really relevant either. Because it's not like, well, we can use this stock for part A or part B. There's no advantage to that because we're going to do half part A and half part B.
Yeah, especially if you're not sawing your own material.
Right. So I was sort of thinking like, as we move forward, I do think, anyway, I'm not sure. I do think there's potential for standardizing on stock, on like bar dimensions.
Yeah.
How do we generalize this for non-machinist folks?
I think you have a pro. The only pro is that I'm seeing right now is a possible changeover reduction, and that you could
in like tray
like tray and work holding potentially for op 1.
Right. But that's not the case yet for me.
Yeah. And so, it's minor.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's, generally I'm all for standardization, but in this instance, I don't think it's beneficial enough.
Yeah, I agree. My big hesitation, I would say, is that similar to like reducing batch sizes or other parts, I think it's easy to underestimate like most people don't standardize.
Yeah.
And so like here's some more places where it could be very handy to run it out of one piece. Let's say we mess up a whole bunch, like we do an overnight run of part A.
Yeah.
And we come in the morning and we scrapped them.
Yeah.
And now we ran out of stock A, but we need to ship an order.
Yeah.
Like, right. You need to essentially, and this is very common, you need to hold higher inventories. And larger warehouse. And in our case, the warehouse is 4 feet by 4 feet.
So you already deal with this effectively because you have multi-part assemblies right now.
Yeah.
What lessons have you taken away from that?
That cutting in-house would be useful. Not useful enough to do it in the space we have.
Yeah.
And then, like we do, this is a place where, so on our 3/4 inch cams, one of them, the difference between our 3/4 inch cam stock and our 1 inch cam stock is like 1/8 of an inch. And so on that, or maybe 0.2, anyway, it's not huge. And so that I have been tempted to standardize on the bigger one because we do sometimes run out, like we do a lot more volume in 3/4. I don't know at this point, but more for sure. And so like there have been times when we haven't run out, but it's kind of like we're close. And then you're looking at the other ones being like, oh, I could use that, you know? So
yeah, for sure. Going back to the target conditions thing.
Yeah.
It could be tempting to say we're going to try and make both pieces literally out of one piece as one operation. Like,
yes,
like machine them both in one go.
Of the new buckle. Yes.
Yeah.
Very tempting.
And like my knee jerk is to say, well, that sounds like a problem because what if you scrap half of the part?
Right.
But going back to target conditions,
why are you scrapping parts?
The solution, instead of saying we can't do that, the thing to do would be to say we're going to do that.
Yeah.
Let's figure out what the challenges are. And that way you simplify a whole lot of things. You reduce changeovers, you reduce storage requirements, and
you've leveled production to more closely match takt time.
Yeah, well, hopefully. But yeah, you've simplified a lot of things.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Interesting. So I didn't do that. Now that you're saying that, because I kind of thought about it, looked at one way of doing it and wrote it off because it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
But now that I'm thinking about it again, I feel like we don't need to dive into this, but I think there may be a way. So that would be awesome. I think it would be, this gets back to the challenge of like, what is the value of standardization? Because like how much, and I've been thinking about this, like how much non-recurring engineering should I be putting into new products and getting them to run? If I only release a product every 6 months, which hasn't happened for the record, then like you can do a lot because then they run for years, right?
Yeah.
So like, is it worth sitting there and scratching my head for another couple days to make that work and figuring out one set of jaws on the gripper that can grab all elements to load and unload? I don't know.
Yeah. It's hard.
It's hard.
A couple days, I mean, you can say that you can put a lot into it, but also that does cost a lot.
Yeah, it really does.
And it does slow down the process.
Yeah. I did have a question for you, then we should probably wrap this up.
Yeah.
Well, it's not really. Anyway. The question is, how did you get better at, or did you get, I assume you did, better at, I've noticed that I do this thing in evaluating my habits around releasing a new product where I develop something that needs to be machined and I'm like, all right, I'm going to go machine it. And then I get to the CNC, I open it up, I load a new blank set of jaws on the vise, and then I go, oh, well, it's not fully programmed. Okay, I need to tweak that. And then I'm sort of like, the machine will end up being idle for 3 hours.
Yeah.
Or like half idle, right? Like I do a cut and then I'm like, well, that didn't.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I need to, and I did a better job last night and arriving today with like code that was pretty ready to run. It wasn't fully ready to run. I'm curious, as you've brought on more people and you're sort of handing off the code.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Well, it's a little bit like the frog boiling in water thing where it's a little hard to go back and pick all the pieces apart.
Yeah. Do you remember having that struggle?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. That's been the primary driver, I think, for a lot of the systems we've been putting in place.
Okay.
It's multifaceted. I think having that board on the wall where I can't move the thing to like ready until I've done a bunch of these steps has been quite key.
Okay, I could see that.
Yeah, so like I'm not allowed to put the thing at the like, this is ready to go until it's fully programmed and I put all the notes in our ERP system and I can like actually confidently say,
run this.
You go forth and be merry.
Right.
You know, there's still a lot of times where they come back with questions or there's an issue and we have to make a tweak. Like I'm by no means infallible.
Yeah, I feel like I always check the simulation for crashes, but I don't like look super closely for any like weird tool, like aspects of the parts that were machined weirdly, or like, you know what I mean? Like really looking at the simulation for
sure
facets that were missed or anything like that. I normally run it once, and then I'm like, oh, I forgot to put that chamfer on there.
Yeah.
Let me add a chamfer toolpath. And
yeah, I think part of it's just iterative too. Like having done it every day now for some years, you just sort of it's just developing habits. But like having
maybe I should do an SOP. Like I like your idea, like what you have on the wall. I could just make a list that's like, here are the steps.
Yeah.
To a new machined part.
Which I should probably do as well, because the things on the wall are pretty broad stroke.
Right. And maybe there's breakdowns in each.
Yeah, they're definitely
typical
should be
flows.
More. Yeah, but having to hand it off to someone,
right,
and really think through it makes you much more attentive.
Okay, and last question.
Yes.
I've been doing a lot of 3D printing in preparation for this product.
Yeah.
In moving to aluminum, there's definitely a lot of like, oh, this is like way, way better than it was in 3D printing.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely seeing the limitations of FDM 3D printing for prototyping in aluminum, or for prototyping a part that will be machined aluminum.
Mm-hmm.
In surface finish and coefficient of friction and stiffness and all these things that are like, it's still such a powerful tool to be able to 3D print, but also only gets you so far, balanced with the fact that hitting, like I can get through 3 or 4 iterations in a day with 3D printing. Sure. And in aluminum, I'm probably at like 1 every day and a half. Like it probably takes me a day and a half to get everything programmed. And
sure. Yeah.
Any thoughts? Like should I buy a higher resolution 3D printer? Should I be more willing to move to machined aluminum earlier? Should I have I think right now I'm aiming for a finalized design, and I don't really have a built-in, like I'm going to do a V1 and then a V2 and maybe a V3 of tooling. In metal. And maybe I should have that just to like, again, like carry forward more ideas and like have a stage of refinement that has to do with the actual material, like the actual finished material.
Sure. I think I'm just thinking this through as we speak, but I think in the sky's the limit scenario, well, to back up slightly, we've discussed quite a bit how great it is to have your prototype tooling also be your production tooling.
Yes.
In the changeover.
Get a spindle gripper. No, well, really, it's a single op vise.
I mean,
it's a pneumatic vise. Yeah, anyway.
On the flip side, that's very limiting in this instance, or can be limiting in this instance, in that it makes your iterative process longer. So I think there's a strong argument to be made for, in the sky's the limit scenario, having a separate workflow that's just for prototyping.
Right.
Then like probably would have a 5-axis machine so you can hit most of your features in one go, and
not worry about cycle times, or
you don't worry about
holding.
Yeah, none of that. It's not your final. And then if miraculously you nail it on the first one, bummer, you have to now make some production tooling in addition to having just done this.
Sure.
But
I kind of like that.
It's probably going to go the other way 90% of the time, that you're going to do 3 of those, and then you're going to make production tooling for your final rev.
Right. And actually, like, a big part of what's wonderful about the pneumatic vise with one station is that you just have very good tool access.
Yeah.
And so actually it's not a huge hurdle. Like before, I think it was annoying doing a tombstone in that I could prototype features that I couldn't readily machine on a tombstone. But I think it's a lot less likely to happen. I will say, if I had a 5-axis, I could make the, like, okay, I can do that with 5-axis machining, but I can't super do it with 4.
You'd still have to design for your production process.
But it'd be less of a constraint. Interesting.
You have a big enough machine that you could almost put like a 5-axis tilting rotary just on one side, and
it's more the bank account than the machine in my case.
Well, no, as like not having to buy a whole other machine. Like you could put a tilting rotary in there and have both workflows exist in one.
That said, in standard fashion, I am thinking about that.
Of course. Who's not? Yeah. So anyway, I mean, whether that means buying another 5-axis or not, I think having a separate workflow that's oriented around
That's
iterating.
a thought. I could get a
be
5-axis tilting. Well, this is really in the machining weeds. Put that on this machine, move the fourth onto a new production machine.
Oh.
Like an R450.
Uh-huh.
Anyway. Cool.
Well, in typical form, we went a lot longer than we expected.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll be here every week, just like every other week.
Yep. You can find me at austere underscore manufacturing on Instagram and austeremfg.com. I think I just demonstrated one value of standardization. So I should standardize those. And
you can find me at likenprecision.com on the web and liken_mfg on Instagram. You can find the pod at incremental CI.
And we have a Patreon.
Patronize.
Which is in the show notes.
We will talk to you soon.